haven't seen her in all these years. And you never looked her up? Not even in Cerebro?
Alex, what do you take me for? Some kind of pervert? Yes, I looked her up once. Twice, but not in a long time, all right?
How'd you leave things? Any hard feelings?
Not likely. Everybody take a break? I wiped her mind off all memories of us. The beach, Cuba, that whole time. It was so long ago, Alex. Before the world knew about mutants, I felt it was the best thing for her.
Good for you.
Didn't really matter what was best for me. Moira McTaggart, hello. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Professor
Charles Xavier. I know exactly who you are.
You do?
Of course I do. I've read all of your papers. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. Moira McTaggart.
Alex Summers.
Have a seat. Just throw that on the floor.
It's wonderful to see you again, to meet you again for the first time. You've got a son?
Yes.
Does he have a husband? Do you have a husband?
I had a husband, but it's hard to do this job and make it home in time for dinner.
Good.
We all make choices, right?
Yes, you do.
Professor.
Yes? Yes. We were hoping that you would tell us about what happened yesterday in Egypt.
I'm afraid that's classified information. And I don't mean to be rude, but how did you get in here?
I have level 5 clearance.
Ever since the world found out about mutants in 73, there have been cults who see them as some kind of second coming or sign of God. I was tracking one of them. They call themselves Ashir and Sabanur, named after an ancient being they believe to be the world's first.
World's first what?
The world's first mutant.
I thought mutants didn't evolve until this century.
That's the common theory, yes, but these guys believe that the first mutant was born tens of thousands of years ago, and they believe he will rise again. They've been searching ancient sites all around the world for clues. These hieroglyphs describe a specific set of powers greater than any man could possess.
They think he lived all that time?
Yes and no. They believe he had the ability to transfer his consciousness from body to body, and whenever he was close to death, he would just take on a new body. Some of these may have been the bodies of mutants, enabling him to take their powers, amassing various abilities over the years.
An all-powerful mutant.
Exactly. And wherever this being was, he always had 4 principal followers, disciples, protectors he would imbue with powers.
Like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. You got that one from the Bible.
Or the Bible got it from him. And wherever he ruled, eventually it would end in disaster. Cataclysm. Some kind of apocalypse.
The end of the world.
Let's do it.
Welcome to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. I'm your host, Perry Constantine, and today I am welcoming a new guest and a fellow podcaster, although I've been on his show a few times, and that is Daniel Cohen. Dan, how you doing today?
Perry, great to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to cleanse all of my hot takes on X-Men Apocalypse. An X-Men movie I feel like has been kind of forgotten about in time. It doesn't have like the disdain that, X-Men The Last Stand has, or obviously the praise that, like a Days of Future Past or X2 has. I think people kind of, shrug when they think about this movie, but I'm excited to talk about it though. Some good things, some bad things. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into this too. This is going to be I think this is the last of the Fox movies that we have not covered yet. So, excuse me. So talking about forgotten movies, even among guests, it seems like it's kind of a forgotten one. But before we get too much into that, tell people a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, all that fun stuff.
Of course. Well, Perry, as you mentioned, you've been on my podcast. Yes, I'm a podcast contributor at thepopbreak.com, and I host a monthly superhero podcast myself, but it is all about Batman. I am the co-host of the Batman by the Numbers podcast with my other fellow co-host, Chris Ingersoll. Man, we've been doing it for almost 3 years now. I can't even believe that. But listen, Batman, I'm always happy to talk about Batman. Obviously, he's my favorite superhero, as I dedicate an entire podcast to him. But of course, there's been so much Batman content, so many iterations. TV series, a ton of live action movies, so many actors have played Batman. I got into Batman probably like a lot of people my age from the 60s show. Listen, like that was my introduction to just to superheroes in general. So, and Perry, as you know, you've been on a couple times. I've talked about my love for the 60s show plenty of times. And yeah, and basically Batman by the Numbers, we do it once a month. And we've done a lot of great content, and a lot of the things we actually do are rankings episodes. So we rank a lot of just different things in the world of Batman. We've done movies, we've done, villain rankings. A few months ago, we ranked, the best cinematic love interest for Batman. And then also this year, as we got a big Superman movie coming out, we also cover a lot of DC content, so we also have done some Superman episodes recently as well. But yeah, that's, we've done some retrospectives on some of the other Batman movies. We did an entire episode dedicated to Batman Returns, of course. And then, of course, Perry, you've been on a couple of our big draft episodes. We've had some real fun Batman by the Numbers draft episodes. We did a villains draft a little while back. We did a Batman Allies draft recently, which you were on, Perry, which was a ton of fun. And then last summer, we did the definitive Batman draft, just taking all sorts of different categories: best Batman movie, best Batman TV series, best Batman actor, a couple of villains, things like that. So yeah, covering all things Batman. And so, of course, listen, I love talking about Batman, but I'm also a big fan of X-Men. And so I'm really excited to just dive into the world of X-Men, which I don't get a chance to do often. So this is exciting.
Yeah, so many things you said in there that I wanted to pick up on. Well, first off, I mean, it's always great to have you Pop Break guys on here. Obviously we've had Alex Marcus on a few times. We had Chris and Randy on to talk about Deadpool and Wolverine. And even though I've been on your show a bunch of times, this is the first time we have you on over here. So really glad to kind of square that circle. And also, we're continuing a little bit of a tradition where we have podcasters who specialize in one character coming on my show to talk about something completely different. Whereas we've had Superman podcasters, Anthony or Tyler coming on to talk about the Punisher or the Crow, and now we got you coming on to discuss X-Men. So it's always fun to shake things up a little bit. And I did wanted to pick up on what you said about how you got into superheroes. So for you, you said it was Batman. It was the 66 series. For me, it was a mix of the 66 series and the 89 film. I was kind of watching those both concurrently. Yeah. And then the summer that Batman Returns came out, everyone talks about the summer of 89 being the Batmania summer. I was too young for that. So my Batmania summer was actually the summer of 92. And then after that, we, of course, had the animated series come out. But you also, but mostly you focused on, the movies, the TV shows. But how about comics? Have you been getting into Batman comics, or at what point did you start getting into those?
Yeah, so I've definitely have read my fair share of Batman comics. I always say this, I'm more of I'm a movie guy first, superhero guy second. But Batman is definitely the character where I think my comic knowledge is solid. I definitely can't compete with a lot of other people out there. But listen, at the end of the day, I've read all the iconic ones, The Dark Knight Returns, The Long Halloween, which that was, I believe, pretty sure it was your first time coming on the Batman by the Numbers podcast. So. We talked about the animated movie, which is one of the few animated adaptations I actually really like. So that's one of my favorite ones. I've read Hush. I don't know all the specific details of every single Batman character out there, but I know the basics. So he's definitely the character I've certainly by a wide margin have read comics on. I've read some X-Men comics, not a ton. My knowledge about X-Men is typically from where that was born, was obviously, like a lot of people, I'm sure, the early 90s animated series. But I have read the comic adaptation of Days of Future Past for sure. But I've read all the big Batman ones, Nightfall, things like that. So that's kind of my comics history, I would say.
And I was about to ask you what your history was with X-Men, so you're jumping ahead of me a little bit here. But speaking of Batman, you guys can't see this on the screen, but my son just popped in and he is wearing his Batman pajamas today. So
the classic logo too from '89, It looks like. So that's great.
Yes. Anyway, so One of the things we also like to talk about with guests here is what kind of stuff are you interested in lately? What's grabbing your attention? Movies, TVs, comics, books, games, anything. Does not have to be superhero related. So what's kind of interesting you lately?
I've been at the time we're recording this, Harry, we are days away from what I guess is being billed as the final Mission Impossible film. You never know with these franchises, right? 5 years later they could do another one. Who knows? But so what I've actually been watching lately is I've been doing a rewatch of all those movies. So I love that franchise. It reminds me of a couple of other franchises I guess I can comp it to would be like the John Wick movies or the Mad Max movies, where it is just action perfected. Those movies are just pure entertainment in the purest form. I love those movies. And again, everyone always points to, the second one's the worst one, but I still think that's very good. And I just love the fact that, a director like John Woo came in to do that. I love that that's part of like the Mission Impossible history. So that's why I'm in the middle of those right now, just getting ready to watch the final one. But all those movies are just really entertaining. Listen, if you haven't seen those movies, please do. If you like action movies, it's required watching. I'm sure a lot of people who like action movies listening to this have seen all those films. Yeah, so it's just, again, to find an excuse to just rewatch those movies again. Yeah, I'll take that opportunity. So just getting ready for the final film, going through the rewatch now. So really excited. So that's what I've been into lately, Mission Impossible.
That's really cool. Yeah, I have all those movies except for 2. That's the one I don't own.
For the reason you just own all of them but 2? Okay, all right, fair enough.
So I skip over 2 whenever I do the whole rewatch. And really, even though I love 1 a lot,
it is the worst one, but I still like it.
Yeah,
I get
you could also skip over 1 because like the whole through line really only kind of begins with 3, although 1 is still really good. So, but.
Well, they bring back some 1 connections though in these later films.
That's true. They brought in
the character of Kittredge coming back. Oh man, you can't forget 1 though. That it might be. I have to really think about it if I were to break down like a rankings. 1 might be my favorite though. I just think it's the most. I would say it's the most efficient movie, and just the set pieces are so well and clearly defined. Like when he's breaking into the CIA and hanging, like that's just it's just such an iconic sequence. So yeah, no, oh man, I love 1. Love the first one.
And also I think the first one is also the purest Mission Impossible, like keeping to that original premise from the original TV series. And it's much more of an espionage thriller, whereas the other ones tend to lean more heavily into the action stuff. So I definitely
totally.
I appreciate it a lot for that. Although the funny thing about 2 is John Woo said that he never wanted to direct a James Bond film. He basically did with 2. So I always thought that was kind of funny about it.
That's fair. If you think about it, that's right. Mission Impossible 2, I would say, does feel like, a later Pierce Brosnan Bond film, right? Just like impressive action. Like, don't get me wrong, like crazy action, but not so much in the story. Whereas I feel like the earlier Brosnan, Tomorrow Never Dies was solid, but I mean, GoldenEye is one of my favorite Bond movies.
Yes,
and I feel like that was a cut above his other ones. He might be my second favorite Bond. I feel bad because he never got the quality of movies that I think he deserved, except for GoldenEye, which is a spectacular Bond film.
Yeah, I saw someone mention on Reddit or something fairly recently that they'd love to see Brosnan come back and do like an old man Bond movie or something. I think that would be amazing. Give him a chance.
I mean,
to
listen,
really
you never know these days, right? They brought back Michael Keaton to play Batman in The Flash. You never know.
Well, we don't talk about The Flash here.
Yeah, sorry I mentioned that. Sorry to bring the room down.
Yeah. It's I'm starting to I get Vietnam flashbacks whenever we talk about The Flash. All right. For my part, I've been really busy catching up with stuff so I teach film classes and, doing stuff for different podcasts. I was recently on Digging for Kryptonite and Krypton Report, and I'm going to be on Nerdy Romantics twice so far. So I've been most of the stuff I've been consuming has been for other shows, other responsibilities. But the one thing that I did watch, and of course I want to talk a little bit about here, is the new trailer for the James Gunn Superman movie. I'm not sure if you got a chance to watch it yet.
I have. Oh yeah, I definitely have for sure. What did you think?
I am so beyond psyched for that. It looks so great. It's the, Corn Sweat. I've been saying for the past few years now that Tyler Hoechlin is my favorite live action Superman. And I think Corn Sweat, just based on what I've seen in this trailer, I think he's going to give him a run for his money, because the opening with him and Lois interviewing him, and just like the small vocal shift he makes from Clark to Superman, and you can almost kind of like see him transform, just like we saw Christopher Reeve transform in the original movie. It looks amazing. And guys, you are listening to this now. Like, we're recording this in May, but this episode is probably going to be coming out after the summer. So by this point, I would have already seen the movie and all that. And so this will be a nice little time capsule for all of that kind of stuff. But what about you? What were some of your thoughts on the trailer?
So you made a really good point about that first sequence in the trailer and about the shift in voice and all that stuff. And, I thought the dialogue in that scene, like, a little choppy, but it's definitely, listen, like you, and just to be clear, this is a movie we've talked about on my podcast, Batman by the Numbers. We're going to be doing a full review of the movie when it comes out. So yeah. Oh, I mean, listen, I'm a big James Gunn fan and what he did with the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. And this is actually coming from someone, I'm kind of notorious on the pop rate because I'm not the biggest MCU fan. But there are a few movies from that universe that I do really like and really champion. And I like all three Guardian movies. Actually a lot. If I had to rank them very quickly, I'd probably go 1, 3, 2, just very quickly. But I still really like 2. But yeah, but some of the things that I thought were really good in the trailer is, I'm just going to jump right to who I think, and Lawrence, what I think is going to be. I was sold on him from the teaser trailer, so we're good there. But I'm just going to jump right to, I think, who is going to be the clear-cut MVP of this movie. And Perry, also connected to the topic we're going to talk about today, Nicholas Hoult is Lex Luthor. I'm telling you right now, this guy, I'm a big Nicholas Hoult fan. And I really like him as Beast, as we'll talk about here a little bit later. But, when I saw The Menu, that was a movie I didn't think I was going to really like that much. But man, he was one of the big reasons on why I was really sold on that. He was also in the Clint Eastwood movie last year that I think it got a small release in theaters, but it was it was Juror Number 2. He was really good in that movie. But I just think again, we've just seen a couple trailers, but you can just smell and feel just the bitterness and just hatred for Superman emanating from the screen from Nicholas Hoult. So he is what I am most excited about with this movie. I just think he's going to be a great Lex Luthor. And this is coming from someone who, by the way, is what I'm also notorious for in the pop break is, I'm a BVS defender. It definitely has its flaws, no doubt, but I'm a big fan of Jesse Eisenberg's take on Lex Luthor. And, the thing is, we've been really blessed. We've gotten a lot of really great Lex Luthors. I mean, to be honest, like, if you were to ask me what my favorite iteration is, it would be tough. Gene Hackman was obviously fantastic in the role back in the 70s. I really like the animated series. And then, of course, look, in Smallville, Michael Rosenbaum. I have that name right, I think. Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was also a great Lex Luthor as well. But I mean, I think Holt is going to be in the running for possibly the best take on this character. So we're going to see. Yeah, listen, I'm very excited about the movie. I really wanted to do well and just kickstart this DC universe. Curious about the Green Lantern connection as well. So yeah, we'll see. So listen, all hope. Really looking forward to this movie for sure. Yeah. July can't come fast enough.
Yeah, I co-sign you everything you said about Nicholas Hoult there. I mean, I do not enjoy his Beast, but I don't blame him for that. We will definitely talk about that. I don't blame him for that. Okay. I blame the writing, because they did not write Beast the way I think he should be written. And, he did the best with what he was given. What he was given was kind of crap, though, I think. But but yeah, I've seen him in other stuff. Like you mentioned The Menu. He was amazing in that. And
Yeah.
Also, Mad
Really
Max
good.
Fury Road. So
Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah. Yeah. He's got a good resume.
he's got a good resume. And one of the cool things is someone had mentioned recently that he was on Michael Rosenbaum's podcast, and he was telling Rosenbaum that he grew up watching Smallville, and so like he's basing his Lex Luthor on parts of it on Rosenbaum's performance. So I think that's great because of the Luthors we've gotten so far. Yeah, I think Rosenbaum would probably be my favorite in live action, although I also want to give an honorable mention to Titus Welliver, who played him in one episode of Titans. And
Okay.
and he played him very much like the Clancy Brown Lex Luthor. And it's the only reason, and I think if he had gotten a chance to play him in a little bit more than just that one episode, I think he would have been my favorite. But yeah, Rosenbaum, definitely my favorite so far. And one of the things I like about what they're doing with Luthor in this is it seems like they are finally, in the movies, pulling away from the kind of Gene Hackman inspired take, because we saw that in Superman Returns, right? Kevin Spacey was doing a little bit of a harsher Hackman, but still it was very Hackman-esque. And then Eisenberg was kind of zany and all over the place. So it looks like we are getting a much more grounded, serious Luthor in this one, which is going to be a nice contrast to the more hopeful Superman. And yeah, I am totally looking forward to seeing that in there. Also, Rachel Brosnahan as Lois, everyone's been talking her up since she was cast. I've never seen the
slam
Marvelous
dunk casting. Yeah.
I've never seen the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. I think it's Ms. Maisel or whatever it's called. But so I've never seen her in anything before. So this is the first thing I'm really experiencing her with. And from that interview scene, I'm just like, oh, okay, we're cooking here. And it looks like we are getting a Lois who's going to rival Elizabeth Tulloch, who's my favorite now, and a Superman who's going to rival David Cornsweet. So we are definitely going to be eating good with on the Superman front. And it looks like they're adapting my all-time favorite Superman comic book story, What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way. So I could not be more excited. On the Guardians thing you mentioned, for me, it would actually be 3-2-1 would be my ranking of it. I love the father-son stuff.
Okay.
It's all the father-son stuff.
They're all there right there for me. Like I love all three of them. I think they're all like it's just a great trilogy from beginning to end.
It is. It's definitely my favorite trilogy so far of the MCU.
And by the way, speaking of Tyler Hoechlin, I think I pronounced it right. But yeah, so just to plug my podcast just one more time, we actually in our recent one of our recent episodes where we ranked all the Clark Kent Superman actors who have played the role essentially in live action. I will not spoil where he finished, but just by the way, you're right. Like I had never seen the Lois and Clark show until doing prep for that episode. And I only had time to just get through a couple. So I didn't have as much context as my other co-host did and guest on that show. But even just from the two episodes I saw, yeah, Elizabeth Tulloch, right? Yeah, she was a great Lois Lane. So yeah. That's another character we've gotten a lot of great actresses who have played that role before. But yeah, I think Rachel Brosnahan is just going to be another one. I just think, yeah, I have seen Mrs. Maisel, not every episode, but born to play the role. It's a good cast. I'm very hopeful for this movie.
Do not sleep on Superman and Lois. Not Lois and Clark. Lois and Clark was the 90s show. But yeah, definitely.
Did I get it wrong? Yes, I'm talking. Just to be clear, yes, I'm talking about the recent one with Elizabeth Tulloch. Yes, so it's called. Okay, gotcha. And I've only seen a couple episodes, but I said this on the podcast that we did. I will get back into it and finish it off. So yeah, it was very good. Very good representation of the characters.
It is very good, and especially it's really cool to see Superman as basically the ultimate nerdy dad. There's a lot of fun stuff they do with it. There's some questionable decisions they make too, as they always do in these things. But so far to date, it's been my favorite that we've seen of Superman in live action. So yeah, definitely worth a marathon on that. And I'm actually going to be talking about the third and fourth seasons on the Nerdy Romantics. Although by the time this comes out, that episode will have been released a long time ago, probably. But anyway, X-Men Apocalypse. So this is the, what is it? 6 X-Men of the X-Men series films, the third film of the First Class series. and the new film in this kind of rebooted timeline that we have. And we have obviously Bryan Singer coming back after his return in Days of Future Past to direct. And we're focusing completely on the First Class now. This is now a full-on transition into the First Class cast as like the core X-Men cast. And we also bringing in the younger versions. This is the first real kind of recasting we've got, because we have Sophie Turner recast as Jean Grey. We have Alexandra Shipp as Storm, and Ty Sheridan as Cyclops, and Cody Smith-McPhee as Nightcrawler. Obviously, we'd already recast Beast and Mystique and Xavier and Magneto and all them, but this is like the full-on recast. We are not in like the young days anymore. These are now supposed to be the actors going forward in this series. And obviously that wouldn't last very long because we get this, then we get Dark Phoenix, then it all falls apart. But you talked a little bit about your history of the X-Men. So you mostly come in through the animated series, but you've read a few of the comics, you said. So what was kind of your feeling going into this movie?
Yeah, so listen, ever since 2000, I mean, I've been a big fan of this X-Men series. It's more hits for me oftentimes than not. Now, look, there's some stinkers, no doubt. X-Men Origins Wolverine in '09 is probably my least favorite. I think everyone will point to X-Men 3, The Last Stand, as being everyone's probably least favorite X-Men movie. Not great. There's actually some things I like about it, but yeah, I mean, but just when compared to the other two, it just doesn't hold up. This was so. I'll just say this: coming off of Days of Future Past, which came out in 2014, I'll just like Days of Future Past to me. I think it mostly gets the credit that it deserves, but I feel like it's still kind of underrated just for me personally in kind of the spectrum of all these superhero movies. Quite honestly, Days of Future Past, I think, is probably one of the 5 greatest superhero movies ever made. I love that film. I think it is a spectacular X-Men movie and is just such a perfect blend of the old characters and the new characters, but it all feels organic. It's all there for the story. It's a great use of all of these characters. There are so many characters, but I think all of them got their moment. And also, too, it was such a perfect use of Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. Look, sometimes that's a character obviously who can be, he can get a little too oversaturated, but in Days of Future Past, he works so well, and just it was all paced so well, all blended together. I love Days of Future Past. So the hype for that movie going into it's one of the few movies. Look, sometimes you go into a movie with a lot of hype. Usually it probably won't live up to it. That's one of the ones where I walked out going, yep, exactly what I thought it was going to be. So when they announced X-Men Apocalypse, I remember it was pretty quickly right off the heels of this one. I was excited because it's the same team returning. But now, of course, officially, I guess you could say the torch has been passed, right, from the older cast now officially to the new cast that is going to helm this series. And I was all for it because I've been on board with James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender's take since First Class. I think First Class is a great movie. Is it a perfect X-Men movie? No, but it's one of the few prequels that I think actually works. Even though at the time it was kind of confusing. Like, was this a prequel? Was it a reboot? We didn't really know. And then they kind of just officially said, yeah, this is actually, yes, it is a prequel because they blended it with the older cast and the older timeline as well. And then, of course, with them bringing in Apocalypse, who's such an iconic villain, who I remember a lot from the animated series, of course, I was very excited. And then also to see characters like Jean Grey and Cyclops back into the fold, I was very excited. Now, the thing is, while in the wake of the announcement of X-Men Apocalypse, I was very hyped going into it. But as we got closer to the film, you could kind of tell from some of the reaction. I remember from some of the reviews. I'm trying to remember what the trailers were like. I think I remember being like kind of okay with the trailers. And so I was going into it well hyped like a couple years ago. I was going in just kind of with leveled expectations. Look, it was just clear that it was just not going to be the grand slam that Days of Future Past was. Um, Walked out of it just basically like it was really one of those superhero movies where I was really torn, like 50-50, because at the end of the day, I'll say this, and kind of my thesis statement on this movie is this, is I think there's a foundation of this movie that is really quite good. And there are moments that I think are that do equal the quality of some of the better X-Men movies like X2 and Days of Future Past. I think the end of the day, what I just my personal feeling is that if you look at it, 2 years in between, from going from Days of Future Past to Apocalypse, I just probably feel like it needed more time. Because like this movie, especially in the first 20 minutes, like it is slow, Perry. It's very slow. There are a lot of things I do like in the first half. We'll talk about some of the details. But yeah, again, just like this is honestly, and this is one of the reasons why I was kind of interested to talk about this one too, is it's really a 50-50 for me. There's a lot of it that I like, but then there's just a lot of it that is just kind of like, whatever. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, like met with a shrug. And I just feel like if you gave this another year or two to really polish at the script stage or whatever, I think this could have been another great X-Men movie. At the end of the day, it's okay. It's honestly like right. If you look at all the X-Men movies, like it's right in the middle of the pack. It's not at the heights of a Logan or a Days of Future Past, but I also don't think it's anywhere near at the bottom of like, X-Men Origins Wolverine. So that's my take on it overall, just right in the middle for X-Men Apocalypse.
Yeah, I'd have to look at them all to see, but in terms of just the main X-Men films, this would definitely be at the bottom, just above. I'm not sure if I would put definitely above Dark Phoenix. Dark Phoenix was the one I hated the most of the entire series, but
the most inconsistent for sure.
Yeah, and I don't know where I'd put this. I struggle if I would put this above or below The Last Stand, because one of the things that The Last Stand does have going for it is you do have that awesome Beast performance, and I love Beast, so that's one thing that keeps me from putting it at the bottom. But I don't know. There are rewatching it last night, there were some things that really stood out to me with like especially on Michael Fassbender. I think of all the actors from this rebooted timeline, first class time, whatever you want to call it, Fassbender, hands down the MVP of it. Like he just completely nails the part of Magneto, and
it's hard to argue.
Yeah. And, you'd mentioned First Class. First Class is one of those movies that I'm actually 50-50 on. I think the first half is brilliant, and the second half, it feels like they kind of don't know what they're doing. And if you go back and you read what they were saying at the time, even they didn't really seem to know, because you had some people saying, oh, yeah, it's a reboot. Others saying, no, it's a prequel. And others saying, whoa. So you see that in the... It's funny because X-Men comics are infamous for having confusing continuity and like contradictions throughout it and being so convoluted trying to figure out. And the movies got there in like 4 movies. By the 4th movie, the timeline's all messed up because they're playing fast and loose with the timeline they established in the previous movies. And then this one too, because I know the whole argument is like, well, they rebooted the timeline after Days of Future Past. Okay, but I don't understand how rebooting the timeline is going to make Jubilee born, 30 years earlier.
Was kind of an excuse to just be like, we can do whatever we want and we can introduce whatever characters we want. I would agree
Basically,
with that.
Yeah.
Inconsistent.
Yeah. It's very inconsistent. It's in terms of where it falls in the timeline. And Days of Future Past, I love a lot. It's not my favorite of the mainline X-Men movies. That would actually be X2 is still my favorite of those.
Totally understandable. Spectacular movie.
My biggest gripe about Days of Future Past is it feels like a pre-Avengers movie. After we're living in a world where we have gotten the Avengers, I feel like Days of Future Past almost feels a bit quaint in comparison. It feels a bit small compared to what that story is really to breathe. Like where it sings, I love the future stuff. I thought all the stuff in the future was great, and I actually wanted to see more of that in Days of Future Past. So I'm a little bit mixed on that. And I feel like, we have all these great characters returning, and the big climax is basically just Wolverine and Beast fighting Sentinels and not much else. So it was a bit of a disappointment in terms of like the action front and the spectacle front compared to what we've seen in other superhero movies. And going back to this one, it felt like this one was going to be taking more of a step in that direction, especially because in some of the trailers we did get a glimpse of like the costumes that they're wearing at the end, which we'll talk about those. I know the internet loves those costumes, but I have some gripes about those as well. So this is gonna be where I get a little bit gripey in my coverage of this movie. But before we jump too much into that, we're gonna take a quick break, and then we'll come right back and we'll dive into the movie. Ever have a situation where you want to watch something on Netflix, but it's only available in another country? Or are you nervous about using public Wi-Fi networks without any protection? Then what you need is a VPN, or virtual private network. A VPN is essentially your own superhero mask that protects your device's secret identity from prying eyes. In these uncertain times, protecting yourself on the internet is more important than ever to prevent your data from being sold to the highest bidder. But free VPNs don't offer the security they promise, so a subscription VPN is best. I've been a loyal user of ExpressVPN for years. It's got fast speed, great support, and is very easy to use. Just install ExpressVPN on your device or Wi-Fi router, click a button, and you've got instant protection. You can also select which country you want to browse from, which gets around geo-blocking on streaming services like Netflix and Disney+. If you'd like to try out ExpressVPN, you can get a free trial by clicking the link in the show notes. So what are you waiting for? Start protecting yourself today. And we are back here to talk about X-Men Apocalypse. So let's dive right into it. I think one of the, and I don't know if I can fully blame this movie for it, but I think one of the weaknesses of this film and this series is they got a little bit too attached to the idea of let's keep doing the period piece thing. So you had, First Class obviously set in 1963. It makes perfect sense. That's when the X-Men were founded. You're doing a prequel. You're showing how Xavier and Magneto got together. Totally makes sense to do that as a period piece. When you get to, Days of Future Past as well, made sense to set that in 1973. So you're going back in time. You're trying to, you're reuniting these two different casts together. Again, perfect sense. By the time you get to Apocalypse, now it feels like it stops feeling like a creative choice and it starts feeling more like a gimmick at this point. And then you get also too in Dark Phoenix, which is set in the 90s. Again, it just feels like a gimmick at this point, and it doesn't feel like they're really doing much with this concept. What did you think about that?
Definitely not in Dark Phoenix. Like, I think it was actually kind of a wasted opportunity. Whereas I actually think in the other ones, I do see what you're saying. I like this gimmick. For every one of these movies, we're in a new decade. What I will say, though, is that in this one, in X-Men Apocalypse, like the fact that they're in the 80s, like it's a little more in your face of how much of a gimmick it is. Like, hey, let's go to the mall. Whereas I think in the 60s and 70s, when they did First Class and Days of Future Past, it was a little more like it felt a little more organic and it wasn't as in your face as much. And you could just kind of like enjoy the atmosphere more, I think, in those movies within time periods. And I don't think they do it like it's not that bad in this one. Like, it's not like, look, it could have been a lot worse. But yeah, I would say it's probably the most egregious in terms of, hey, look at this, we're in the 80s than all the other ones. And then, like I said, at Dark Phoenix, they don't even like, they should have done more of that. It didn't have like, that one didn't have a 90s feel at all. Although, I don't know, it's been a long time since I've seen Dark Phoenix. I'd kind of be curious to see what I think about it if I watched it again. I don't know. I'd probably just be let down again. But at the end of the day, like in terms of the time, I definitely see what you're like. You're dead on. It can very much be, I think, a distracting gimmick. But that whole theme worked for me, like, as you keep going to the next movie. So I didn't mind it. But yes, I would agree that this one, as opposed to the previous two, it's a little more in your face. Totally fair.
Yeah, and also we have well, one of the problems that I have with that gimmick too is we're using the same actors and they haven't aged all that much. Like, when
about that last night when I watched the film.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, Xavier kind of calls it out himself when he talks about Moira, and he's like, "Wow, she hasn't aged a day." I'm like, "Well, yeah, no one has. You made these movies like 10 minutes ago."
It doesn't help when they're doing flashbacks to the other movies and they look exactly the same.
Right? Yeah,
Yes,
and
I
also,
thought about that. I thought about that too.
well, there's also the whole part about, Havoc and Cyclops, where in the comics, right, Cyclops is the older brother. Here, they have to make him the younger brother here.
Yeah, they flipped it. Yeah.
In 1963, Havoc was what, in his early 20s, and then in 1983,
It honestly
20
looks
years
like
later,
Havoc got younger in this one.
I know.
You're right. It does not make any sense.
So that doesn't make any sense at all. I'd mentioned the Jubilee thing, where now she's been born 30 years earlier because of the time travel stuff. But there's, even with the previous film, there's not a whole lot of continuity, because we saw at the end of Days of Future Past, Mystique was posing as Stryker when they found Wolverine in the bay. And then in this movie, there's no mention of that whatsoever, right? It's just the Mystique part is gone. Stryker is in control of Wolverine. He has him he's doing the Weapon X thing to him there. And it's like it was completely incongruous to what we had seen even in that last movie. And it's just like the thing that drives me crazy about these movies, and I hate to be too much of a continuity stickler. I hate to be that guy who says like, well, in the comics they did this, but in because I try to look at these things as something separate from the comics. So I don't mind all the changes from the comics as much as some X-Men fans do. But one thing that kills me is that it feels like they didn't even care enough to watch their own movies before sitting down to write this one. And that seems to be a running theme throughout all these films.
One of my biggest criticisms of these X-Men movies, and this is coming from someone who, again, really, really does love this series. And like I said, it's more hits than not. But at the end of every X-Men movie, it always feels like they're teasing, like, now you're going to get like the X-Men in their prime. And they're going to, but it's always, but like, even like, I know you had some criticisms of the costumes and everything at the end of X-Men Apocalypse, but like at the end of X-Men Apocalypse, it's like, all right, here it is. Like, this is the team. And now we're going to see them in their prime on their missions and everything. And then even at the end of Days of Future Past, it's like, they're all back. Cyclops, it's Beast, it's Wolverine, it's Jean Grey. They're all back in the mansion, and we're gonna go on an awesome legendary adventure with all these characters. And then, of course, then you get Logan, and you find out that yeah, they all got wiped out. But I'm not gonna criticize Logan here, which is probably honestly my second favorite comic book movie ever made. So whatever, Logan's awesome. But yeah, so that'd be one of my criticisms. Is I always feel like we get like it's like every X-Men movie feels like a side story to like just like I guess I'm just comparing it to the animated series, where it always felt like this is the core team and they're going to go out and kick some ass. But it's like we never really get that in any X-Men movies. Like the teams are always constantly changing. And then some people are like, whatever, different ages, and you're getting different iterations of characters, and some of them have been rebooted. So it's a fair criticism of this franchise if you wanted to criticize it.
No, that's absolutely. I hadn't thought about that particularly, but yeah, of all the films, I think the only one that actually kind of lives up on that promise from the previous film is X2. All the other ones, it's just like it. But even X2, then we get screwed when in The Last Stand, because in X2 we have them all standing in the White House. We got the whole team assembled. We got Nightcrawler there and everything. We've seen Colossus in action, and you get the glimpse of Phoenix in the water, and you're like, oh, okay, next movie, we're going to be cooking. We're getting full on X-Men action. And we don't.
Well, then even in X2 and X-Men 3, like Cyclops is just like a non-character, which is actually one of the reasons I was looking forward to this one. I was like, oh, finally, we're going to get like Cyclops is actually going to be like a character, because he's such an important X-Men character. Like, I'm not going to say he's like one of my top 3 favorite X-Men characters. He's so important to just the lore of like, he's the leader of this team, and you never see him. It's like he's in X2, which is, again, I agree, probably a top 3 X-Men movie for me. But he's just gone from the middle of the film. And then X-Men 3, obviously he's killed off in like the first 20 minutes. And so, yeah, it's just like he never gets his moment to shine. I do actually like him though in this movie. Like, he actually, just in comparison to the other iterations we've seen of Cyclops, I think Ty Sheridan does a good job. Like, I felt like again, it's not like phenomenal, but I actually felt like for once I kind of know who this character is. Like in the first X-Men, he's not bad. Like you can tell he's like a born leader and like very loyal to Professor Xavier and all that. But this is like the first time where I actually felt like, okay, he's like I'm seeing where he came from. He's a little developed here, so that was nice to see. That I would say it's one of the bright spots for me in this movie. Is I did like his performance as Cyclops.
James Marsden is low key one of my favorite aspects of the original X-Men trilogy, and I feel like
He was wasted.
He's so wasted, but if you look closely, you can see what he's trying to do, and it especially comes through in the deleted scenes from the first X-Men movie. So if you go back and you look at
maybe I did years ago. I'd have to go check that out.
Go check him out on YouTube, because there's some really interesting things he does. Like, for example, the exchange with him and Wolverine in the bedroom. That's an extended sequence, and they clipped out like just a few parts of it, but the whole sequence actually plays out a lot better, because one of the criticisms a lot of people who aren't as familiar with Cyclops, or if they're only familiar with him from these movies or from the or from 92, is that he's this uptight Boy Scout type of thing. He's like, Professor X's lapdog and all that. If you go and look at him in the comics, he's basically like Captain America for the X-Men, for the mutants. One of my favorite moments in the comics is when someone says to him, he's like, "Oh, so now we go to Plan B," and he's like, "No, Plan B implies I have a limited number. This is Plan 2." So it's like he's like the ultimate strategist. He's low key a hardcore badass. And one of the things I like about his Marsden's performance, the first X-Men movie, you look at that first scene when Wolverine confronts him in Professor X's office, and he grabs him and he says, "You can want to get out of my way." And you just see like James Marsden just has this kind of like, and he just kind of like peeks around at Professor X, and it's this look. It's like, listen, you want to handle this, or am I going to bust this guy's ass up?
I'm going to obliterate this guy. Great point. And you're right. I would say he's very effortless in the role, in the first one in particular. And look, yeah, you're right. Like he has some, I want to see more of him. He has some really good scenes in the first one. Like I like his scene with just him and Patrick Stewart when Professor X is essentially in the coma, right? And he's just like, "Look, I will take care of them. Like, don't worry. Like, I've got this."
And that also plays out longer in the deleted scenes too.
And even in like X-Men 3, like I think one of the elements that I would have loved to have seen fleshed out in these X-Men movies is his contentious relationship with Logan. And even in X-Men 3, which is, he's totally just washed away in that movie, like there's a good scene. They have a good scene at the beginning of the movie where, Cyclops is obviously down the dumps after what happened with Jean Grey. And Logan is like kind of trying to like hype him up like, "Hey, look, it's tough, but we got to move on." And it's kind of like a role reversal, because now Cyclops is kind of the more emotionally unstable character, and Wolverine's trying to sort of like mentor him a little bit. So like you get these little spurts, but yeah, like I think we're in agreement. We went off on a real James Marsden tangent, but like he's a really good actor, and it was a good choice for sure. Now that we're seeing years later in retrospective, but he just did not get the scenes that I think he deserved in those first three X-Men movies. But I do think Ty Sheridan honors him pretty well in this movie. Like I think he did a performance.
Yeah, one of the things I do want one more thing about Marsden is, again, you go back to that scene with him and Logan in the bedroom. The whole thing where he's like, you're going to tell me to stay away from your girl. And in that whole scene, Logan is trying to stick it to Cyclops. He's trying to needle him. Like he says, he's like, "Oh, you're the leader. Have you ever seen Real Combat Boy?" And Marsden just plays it completely effortless, completely cool. It's like, "Have you? You don't know anything about your past. How do you know that you've seen Real Combat?" And, it's just like the whole thing. He plays it very cool, very effortlessly. It's like this whole thing where Logan is constantly trying to needle him, and Cyclops is just not taking the bait at all. And he's just responding with like ultimate detachment. I thought Marsden played that effortlessly. So go check out those scenes on YouTube if you haven't seen.
Why he's the leader, which is he's control, and he's in command, and it's a great point.
But really, so far, the only time that I think Cyclops has really gotten his due in adaptations has been in X-Men 97. Like X-Men 97 did an amazing job with him, and from that first episode, I'm like, okay, finally we get, because I love Cyclops in the comics. He is definitely one of my favorite X-Men. And I love his whole dynamic with Wolverine in the comics too, because it's not necessarily this hatred like it's often portrayed as, or it's often oversimplified as. There is a legitimate mutual respect they both have for each other. And
Right, exactly.
it's like, I mean, best I can describe it as being very similar to the Superman Batman dynamic in the comics.
It's exactly what I was thinking. I was about to say it has that DNA for sure, no doubt. They have a mutual respect for each other. Sometimes they're at odds, but again, they're better when they're teaming up, and and nothing can stop them. Right? That's the whole idea.
Exactly. Now going to this, I was not as impressed with Ty Sheridan. I felt like they were trying to do. I think they're trying to go too stereotypical, where it's like, oh yeah, the rebellious teenage guy ends up growing up to become the more stoic leader type of thing, and it just felt very obvious what they were trying to do with him, and not particularly interesting at all. Sophie Turner as Jean, I got a little bit more mileage out of her. I thought she was a little bit more interesting. Cody Smith-McPhee as Nightcrawler didn't really have much of an opinion of whatsoever. He was just kind of there.
I agree.
Yeah. So yeah, in terms of those casts, but I think what really worked for me very well was definitely, like I said before, Michael Fassbender. He works really well in this, and they're taking this stuff from some X-Men lore, whereas after the war, after World War II, after he escaped from the Nazis, him and his wife Magda, they end up moving into this small European village, and they have a daughter, Anya, I think her name was, if I'm remembering correctly. And Magneto's powers are still burgeoning in this comic story. And when they come out, some guy is trying to stiff him on payment, and it comes out with him mentally, unconsciously lifting up this crowbar and throwing it at the guy because he's angry about this. And then this guy, he leads a whole mob to Magneto's house to try and do something about it, to confront him. And they burn the house with his daughter inside. So they kill his daughter, and he, understandably, he flips out and he uses his powers to massacre pretty much the whole village. And then Magda, she sees what happened. She's terrified, and then she runs away from him. And then not telling him at the time that she was actually pregnant with Wanda and Pietro. So,
okay.
Which would later get, retconned and everything. So just a whole mess. But in my headcanon, it's still, they're still his kids. So yeah, I did like seeing them.
Though, yeah. I mean, with Fassbender, that's the stuff that really pulls you into this movie, right? And again, you said he's the MVP of this kind of new kind of version of these X-Men characters, and I would agree. And he's the MVP of this movie. And I think what really works with him here is it's just, there's so much, it's so tragic what happens to him. He wants to live this life of peace, just get away from it all. He's got a wife, he's got a kid, but then just the way it's all taken away is so tragic, and that it's all just by an accident. Everything about it just sucks. He turns himself in. And he's just I'm turning myself in. I'm going to protect my wife and daughter. And then understandably, his daughter, who can't control her mutant powers, and it's a total accident. And then even the bow and the arrows just shot off in kind of an accident as well. And it all sucks. It's all tragic. Then of course it doesn't take long for, of course, Magneto's old instincts to kick in, and then that's it. And then, but then you get the later scene where he's just, and I think he sells it. You could be a little melodramatic, but he's like, "Is this what you want from me?" But when Fassbender's doing that, oh, you buy it. And then also that's why I think, and we can talk about Apocalypse later, what works and doesn't work, but that's kind of the part of the story that you do buy into in terms of its tragic nature, is because very sadly you understand why he's now going to be influenced by this guy. And one of the more just heartbreaking scenes for me is when Apocalypse takes him back to Auschwitz, and again, it's a reverse of which is probably one of my favorite scenes in any X-Men movie, in X-Men First Class. And just very quick, and I agree with you on X-Men First Class. And that my whole thing on that movie is, I think McAvoy and Fassbender are operating on such a high level. It's just everybody else is just kind of okay by comparison. I think that's probably the biggest failing of that movie. But the best scene in X-Men First Class is when Xavier teaches Magneto to use his powers not through rage, but through, emotion. and serenity. And that's how he's able to elevate and make himself more powerful, is because of that. And then just the sickening thing that happens here is that Apocalypse teaches him the exact opposite again. It's so sad, but it's a very effective scene. So yeah, that's like he is the reason why I'm like, this is like, there's some good stuff here. There's some good X-Men stuff here. I mean, the Magneto has been, I think we can agree, like we've talked about Cyclops, right? And just kind of what has worked and what didn't work with him, and kind of like the wasted opportunities with James Marsden. But when it comes to that character, when it comes to Eric Lencher, they did not waste their opportunities. Both Ian McKellen and Michael Fassbender have been given great material, in my opinion, for these movies, for sure.
Absolutely. Even when they lean more into the less sympathetic version of Magneto in Last Stand,
right.
Not fast. McKellen's performance still elevates it. Like that, that line when he says in the church, right? Nobody talks about it. They just do it. And he says, and then one night, while you're planning and strategizing, they'll come for you and your children. And it's just like this
he's a pure villain in that one, but like it's still very effective. And I mean, again, like X-Men Last Stand, obviously one of the lesser X-Men movies for sure, but you can't argue, like, one of the scenes that really sticks with you in X-Men The Last Stand, there are two of them, and they're both involve Magneto. One is just the pure action scene where he's moving the bridge, which, look, I don't care what you think about that movie, but that is just, to watch that in the movie theater was awe-inspiring. But also when Raven, Mystique, gets shot with the cure and he just leaves her there. I mean, wow, that is, like, I will never forget that moment in that movie. So again, just another movie that I think has some good moments, but is very flawed.
Yeah, absolutely. And so yeah, the Magneto stuff in here is very cool. But one of the things that also kind of bugs me about all these movies is they can't seem to get away from Magneto at all. Like, every time we're going to be bringing in a new villain, we still have to bring Magneto in as well. And so much so, like in Dark Phoenix, it felt really egregious because in that movie, he just had nothing to do at all.
I got to be honest with you. I don't even remember like what his role was in Dark Phoenix. Like, I've seen that movie twice, and that is like the hardest one for me to even remember. Like, I remember him in Dark Phoenix, like he was like kind of a good guy again, right? And he's just kind of like, he's like doing his own thing, trying to help mutants, is what I remember. And I remember Jean Grey like went to go visit him to like talk to him, but like that's all I can remember. But yeah, you're right. Like, it feels like, yeah, there was, again, I'm not remembering, so I think I'm just going to co-sign what you said, and that I just don't even remember what his role was in that. But you're right. It's like, I get it. They can't get away from Magneto, but at the same time, I'm like, well, I mean, why would you? He's such a compelling character, but totally fair.
Well, one of the things I'm mixed about on this part, because Magneto is far and away the best part of this movie, but at the same time, I feel like this movie is hampered because they brought Magneto back, because they keep going back to that well.
That's true, but I agree with you and disagree with you in this sense, in that, like, I think his involvement in this movie makes some of Apocalypse scenes a little better, is because like when you look like Storm, and I think Alexandra Shipp does a really good job with what she's given, but Storm there's just not a lot there to the character in this particular movie, which is a shame, because Storm is obviously a character who should be given. I mean, he controls the weather. It's funny. I remember, I want to say, I can't believe I'm bringing this up, but I want to say it was the Ebert and Roper review of the first X-Men movie, actually. And they're talking about it. I'm pretty sure it was the Ebert and Roper review. And I think I want to say, I can't remember which one of them it was, but they're like, why are we so fascinated with this guy who just like unleashes claws when you literally have someone who controls the weather? It's like, why are we more focused on this character? I'm pretty sure that was the Ebert and Roper review. You can go look it up. But yeah, but again, that's the problem with Apocalypse, is that like with Storm and with Angel and Psylocke, there's not a lot there. It's just like, yeah, okay, I'll recruit you all, like whatever. But with Magneto, at least there's like some development there. And Apocalypse is sensing a reason why he's going to be able to influence him and get him on his team, basically. So I think he does serve a good purpose here, and then fleshing out just kind of Apocalypse's villainy. I mean, the one nice thing I'll say about Angel in this movie is the transformation scene was cool. And Metallica is my favorite band, and anytime there's an excuse to play a Metallica song, I'm not going to complain. So, but other than that, couldn't tell you one thing about the Angel character in this movie. But his
I agree
transformation
with
scene
that.
was cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And like I said, that as much as I feel like this movie is kind of held back because they keep focusing on Magneto, the contrary to that is, like you said, the Magneto scenes are the best part of the movie. And he is the only one of these horsemen which really kind of feels like they have an actual reason for doing this. All the others,
Well, the
it's
thing
just
is,
like, well, here we are.
exactly. But and here's the thing, like if you didn't have Magneto in this movie or there was a less of a focus on him, I mean, could we have fleshed out the villain who really should have had his day in the sun in this movie, which is Apocalypse? Which I'll just here's my take on this character is I actually think I actually think the performance by Oscar Isaac is actually quite good. The problem is the character gets less interesting as the movie goes along, actually. That's honestly, I think the biggest failing of this movie, if I'm being honest, is it's called X-Men Apocalypse. The problem is that I actually really like the early scenes with him and just him kind of just walking around observing this new world, which he's of course been out of for generations and generations and generations and generations, thousands and thousands of years, right? And just kind of watching him walk around and being like, where am I? Like, what is this? Like, even little simple things like him absorbing the information through the TV. I actually found that kind of fascinating. And also, too, what I think is good about him in this movie, but again, they could have gone so much more with it, is like make him even scarier. Because there are moments where I actually felt like this is a scary villain, like putting people in walls and in between floors. Like, you got something there. Like, that is a good villain. Problem is, as the movie goes along, he's just another like whatever, I want to destroy everything villain. Like some of his scenes with Charles are okay, but that's my biggest, I think it could be my biggest failing with this movie is this was the wasted opportunity, is the title of the film, is Apocalypse. Whereas I think you had something there at the beginning. And this is where I'm saying, I just think 2 years was not enough time. Like, flesh this guy out. Like, what really makes him tick? And like, I got a little bit of a sense of that. Like, I get his whole like objective and I get what he's about. Like, I'm here to just cleanse the earth of everything, and if you remain, then great, we'll inherit it together. But at the end of the day, like the last 40 minutes is just like a bunch of people trying to punch him, and there's not a whole lot there. Whereas I thought in the first 30 minutes, you actually had something with Oscar Isaac. And I don't even want, like, if you don't have Oscar Isaac in this role to elevate the material, like then I think this movie has big problems. But that's my biggest feeling of this movie.
Well, I think one of the things about it is I actually think Apocalypse is the character that Singer is the least interested in this movie. I feel like this whole movie is just Singer keeping time until he can get to do his version of Dark Phoenix, because he was robbed doing that with X-Men 3 because he went to do Superman Returns, and then Fox pulled all this bullshit with him, so he didn't get to do his X-Men 3. And I feel like he wanted to do that, but he couldn't jump straight from Days of Future Past to his Dark Phoenix. So instead, he has to do this movie here where he's kind of like setting things up for Dark Phoenix and all that. And it just feels like he is not interested at all in the character of Apocalypse. And I feel like that's why.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're right. And it's all, you're dead on. Like, I mean, you can clearly tell that by the end of the movie. It's all to set up Phoenix. And I agree with you. Sophie Turner, like, great. I think she's very good in the role. And it's a cool moment when you see the fire and the Phoenix monitor. Like, it's good. Like, I was like, yeah, I'm buying this imagery. Like, but it's like, I mean, we did have a movie called X-Men Apocalypse. You're right. I would say, like, one of my favorite, again, we've always seen Jean Grey as like the most powerful mutant in all of X-Men lore, right? That's kind of the consensus, right? And that's kind of the belief that we all have, is that this is, even in X-Men 3, like, they're like, oh my God, she's a level 5. Like, I've never encountered a level 5 before. But I actually think in this movie, one of the better moments, and it's very subtle, but it's good, is when, you have the earthquakes or whatever caused by Apocalypse. And, Jean Grey is obviously the one who can kind of sense it the most. And she's, flipping out in the middle of the night or whatever, and Professor X is going over there. And I think what a great moment is, and you really get a sense of just kind of Jean Grey's power, is when Xavier is telling Hank, like, make sure like everyone stays away from here, like don't come near this room. And you can see kind of the look in his eyes of there's a little bit of fear there, because Charles knows, he knows that Jean will be the most powerful mutant, and like honestly like 20 times probably more powerful than him. So I like that subtle stuff and that subtle dialogue of just kind of you get a sense of Jean Grey's power, which also fleshes out Charles as a leader and a mentor, as a teacher, because you can kind of feel the weight of the world on his shoulders, because he knows that he needs to really mentor this student very closely, and like there's a lot of pressure on him to make sure that he guides her on the right path, so she doesn't become so powerful that she can't control it. And we see what happens in X-Men 3.
Yeah, I think McAvoy it's one of the great tragedies, because as these films fall apart, McAvoy grows into his role as Professor X. I feel like each time he plays the character, he gets a little bit closer to him. Whereas Fassbender nailed it right off the park from the very first scene in First Class. McAvoy felt like he had to kind of find the character, and some of that is due to the writing too, like where they're putting Professor X in each one of these things. Like one of the things I hate about First Class is him, like the whole idea of him being weirded out by Mystique's natural blue form. Like that whole thing, it's just like that's not Professor X for me. Like that is one of the things that really kind of needles me whenever I watch that movie.
That's fair. Yeah.
And then, but as we go through it, in each one of these movies, he gets a little bit better, he gets a little bit closer to the character. And I feel like by the time we get to Dark Phoenix, we're very close to getting the character and very close to seeing like how this guy can become the Patrick Stewart Professor X. But the movies fall apart. So it just gets continually worse for him as his performance becomes elevated. And yeah, this one I think is a really good job. We get to see him, working a little bit more. We get to see a little bit more of him caring about them as students, and all that stuff is great. And I think that stuff works really well. Now, where this movie, I think, where the performances start to get weak. I mean, and one strong performance too I want to call out too is Alexandra Shipp as Storm. I think again she does pretty well with what she's given. She actually puts on a convincing African accent compared to whatever Halle Berry was doing in the first one. But you know what the funny thing is? She is never once named in this movie.
Like, just wow. Man,
never.
You might be right.
Her name is never uttered in the movie, not once.
Never Storm or never Aurora.
She's never called Storm. Yeah. She's never called Aurora. It's just she is never named in the movie. We just all take it. But one of the things that's weird about this too, and this goes back to the continuity thing, because she starts off here having black hair, but then her hair turns white because of Apocalypse's manipulations. So then I'm left wondering, well, how did she get white hair in the original series? Like none of this makes. They keep trying to do these things to try and this is another case of they're not really paying attention to what they've done before. And
it's just really a shame. It's a great character. She probably deserves her own movie. I would, it's funny because going back to X-Men 3, like it might be her. I think it might be one of her better films because at the very least, you at least get to see Storm as a leader. So there's that. And I also will say in Days of Future Past, Halle Berry, I think Halle Berry's mere presence in that movie is actually really good. Like you can feel the gravitas of that character in Days of Future Past because of her presence there.
Yeah, but I feel like she was much better in Days of Future Past. I feel like when they actually gave her something to do in The Last Stand, though, I feel like they completely wasted her and they just basically made her angry black woman, which is not Storm at all, which really annoyed me about her performance in that. And Nicholas Hoult,
X-Men 3 tangent before we get into Nicholas Hoult. It's funny because it's like one of the elements I actually really like in X-Men 3 and is what a lot of people dislike is actually, I think the Jean Grey Phoenix character in X-Men 3 is actually, I'm really torn because I know there's so much more epic backstory to the Phoenix character in X-Men 3. But I like, here's the thing. I like what they do, because if you really think about it, those three X-Men movies, I mean, let's just be honest. Like, they just made Wolverine the main character. Like, it's all from his point of view, basically. And so I think there is a tragic nature to him having to be the one to have to kill Jean Grey to basically save everyone. So, like, it's like, at least to that trilogy, there's some closure. And I do kind of, even though you could say the Phoenix story itself is underserved, I kind of like this simmering aspect of her power that's bubbling up throughout the entire movie. But at the same time, I do also get people's complaints of like, there's so much more to this Phoenix character. Like, when are we going to do it right? So it's like, it's again, it's a positive and negative of that film.
No, I think you're right. I think Famke Janssen does a really good job, especially in the beginning of that
Absolutely.
movie.
Yeah.
I mean, but
Yeah.
once she joins up with Magneto, then she's just kind of like standing around because nobody knows what to do with her. So
True.
But up
It's
until
just
that, like the stuff with her, the scene with her and Scott, the scene with her and Logan, the scene at her home, like all of that stuff, she sings in that part, very, very much so. And it's just like the movie doesn't do her any service. But yeah, Nicholas Hoult. This is my thing. It feels like their conception of Beast is that he is just the nerdy science guy. And there's no consideration to what the character's actual personality is in the comics, which you compare it to. And I think it's because, we did have different writers on The Last Stand compared to these First Class movies. And I feel like Zach Penn, you can say what you want about Zach Penn, but one thing you cannot deny is that he actually does like this stuff. He actually is a fan of the comics. Whereas I don't get the sense that Simon Kinberg, I know for a fact that Bryan Singer is not. I don't get the sense that Kinberg, Doherty, Dan Harris, I don't get the sense that any of them are very familiar with the comics at all, because their conception of Beast is very much not what I think of when I think of this character. He just comes off as just very kind of like almost pathetic. Like this whole thing, like he's like, I based the blue on Rage. It's like, dude, it's been 20 years now. Get over it.
You're not okay. So pathetic's a little hard, but although I kind of see what you're saying, I think here's the thing. I actually agree with you, but I just think that Nicholas Hoult is just, I guess for me, he's very likable in the role. And I just kind of like having him around in these movies. But what I will say is you are accurate in this sense, in that I was actually thinking about this a little bit last night too, is like, I don't understand how this guy becomes the Kelsey Grammer character. It doesn't make any sense. Because also if you think about it, and I know it's a different version of the character, but if you think back to the animated series, it's like, this is not a guy who I think is going to be doing constant quotes from, thousands and thousands of books of literature, like on a whim. Like, you don't get that feeling. You don't get that, I guess, like, for lack of a better word, intellectual side, right? I mean, obviously he's very smart and he's a brilliant scientist and he's a brilliant, builder of things. Right. They kind of retcon this idea that he kind of built Cerebro in First Class. He builds all the jets. Right. So clearly he's a genius, but you don't get that sort of other side of him that you do with Kelsey Grammer's take on the character. So I actually think it's a very fair criticism. And but at the end of the day, I just think that I just like having him around. I like his performance. And in Days of Future Past, he has some good fight scenes as well, for what that's worth. But yeah, it's like, I guess at the end of the day, I agree with everything you said. I guess I'm just more forgiving of it. But you're right. It's like, at the end of the day, he's not like, I don't understand how this connects to the character we see in X-Men 3, or even in the literally 1.8 seconds that you see him at the end of Days of Future Past is when Kelsey Grammer comes. It's like, it's the same character.
I mean, even in the Marvels, like we get more Beast in that one post-credit scene in the Marvels than I feel like we get in 3 or 4 movies with Nicholas Hoult. All right. But anyway, we're going to take another quick break and then we'll come right back. Since you're listening to this show, I already know you love watching superhero movies and TV shows, and you just might enjoy superhero comics. But how about superhero novels? I'm giving away 2 free superhero novels and 1 free superhero short story. Visit percivalconstantine.com/SCP to get access to Vanguard, Heroes Forged, the first novel in my own Avengers and X-Men inspired superhero novel series, and Ronin Born, my cyberpunk superhero novel set in a futuristic Japan. I'm also throwing in Fire and Lightning, a free prequel story to my new Power Rangers inspired superhero series Omega Knights. So visit percivalconstantine.com/SCP, those are just the letters SCP, to get started, or click on the link in the show notes. And now on with the show. And we are back. All right, now I want to get in the elephant of the room, and this is Jennifer Lawrence. I'm going to say I like Jennifer Lawrence as an actress. I think she was great in The Hunger Games. I think she was great in things like Silver Linings Playbook. I liked her in First Class. I kind of in Days of Future Past, she was starting to wear on a little bit thin, but in this, and I don't blame her completely, right? But I just feel like what happened is she did First Class, and then she did The Hunger Games, and The Hunger Games hit it big, and she became this huge star. And then the producers said, "Oh, she's our new Wolverine," and that's what it feels like happened. And then they just kind of like hang all these movies on her as like the mutant, as like the mutant here. Which, first off, you shouldn't be doing that anyway. The X-Men is an ensemble property. It's supposed to be. That's one of the things that it's funny. Everybody going into the Avengers, the first Avengers movie, everyone assumed it was going to be the Tony Stark show guest starring the Avengers, right? And all the other characters were going to be like kind of minimal compared to him. And then we saw that movie, and what happened was everyone actually got a very good arc, except for Hawkeye. But in that first movie, almost every character got a very good arc, and they were all pretty well developed. You compare it to any of these X-Men movies, and it's always the Eric, Charles, and Logan show. And then in this movie, we're taking Logan out of that, and then we are plopping in Raven instead. And it's just like, this role does not work for Mystique as a character, and Jennifer Lawrence does not work as the core of this film, of this series that they're trying to make her. And I don't blame her for that. I just feel like this is a decision that was made based on her popularity at the time, and the whole series, the whole franchise is worse off as a result.
Look, obviously Jennifer Lawrence, I mean, great actress. Man, I forget why am I blanking on the comedy she was in a couple of years ago? I can't remember. But she also, like, aside from her dramatic work, she's very good comedically as well. She was in I wish I could remember it. No Hard Feelings maybe was the name of it. I'm trying to remember the name of this comedy she was in, but very good. But Jennifer Lawrence, I think you're right when it comes to Days of Future Past, and that clearly they were trying to amp up her role, make her more pivotal, which did make sense in that, like, she did play like the critical plot point of that movie, right? That it all hinges on stopping her from shooting Bolivar Trask. That's his name, right? Bolivar. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Peter Dinklage. And I think she's very good in First Class. I think she's almost right up there again with McAvoy and Fassbender. I think she is one of the standouts in that movie too. I also, now that I'm talking about it, I do like Kevin Bacon in that movie. Kind of a quirky villain. He was good. I
got something to say about that, which I do have a connection between Kevin Bacon and Apocalypse in this, which I'll get to. But anyway, finish your thought first.
Now in Apocalypse, though, I'm really torn because, like, on the surface, the performance just not a lot there. It's very monotone. At the same time, I kind of feel like it almost works for the character who's just this kind of like no nonsense, like, I don't want anything to do with this, but like I don't want, in the sense of I don't want anything to do with me being held up as this like great hero and the face of all mutant kind. Like, I do want to help mutants, but I'm going to do it in my own way, low key, and then I'm going to move on to the next one. Just kind of cut off all this, all these emotional ties, because I think like it kind of makes sense for the core of that character when you think about what her journey was in the previous two movies, where you could say like, look, she tried to she was kind of immune without a home, right? Kind of like Wolverine at times, where she tried to get along with the Professor X kind of philosophy, right? But that kind of burned her. Then she tried to get in with the Magneto philosophy, but that kind of burned her. And then she just kind of went off on their own. So there is a fascinating layer of the character. I can see why at times they would want to focus on her. But I generally agree with you in this sense, in that like as the movies go along, the performance just isn't as charismatic. At the same time, though, I don't think it's supposed to be. So I think at times, sort of the lack of just kind of like the low emotion as compared to some of the other previous two films. In a way, it sort of works for her as just kind of like, I'm just going to cut through lead, no nonsense. I'm going to help this mutant and then just kind of go on to the next one. But I think it's also a little interesting here too, is like there's still a part of her that does care for Charles and Magneto, because whenever they're in trouble, she immediately goes back to them. So there is some layers to that character, but I would agree with you as well in that there's just something about the performance at times it just doesn't always connect. But at the same time, like I was never distracted by it. And again, I think sort of like the cutting through and the kind of the coldness almost works for her performance at times for Mystique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like that the whole thing about Mystique is they're trying to pigeonhole her in this like, symbol or heroic symbol for mutants, when what she should be is she is like she's the ultimate mutant revolutionary, right? She should be more like, I'm trying to think of a good example, but like, she's like someone who she's a bomb thrower, right? She's someone who is, going up against the system and trying to tear it all down. She is not this symbol of rising above or anything like, or like this symbol of like, mutant human, acceptance or anything like that. She is someone who is going to tear it all down and build something else up out of it. And I don't feel like they ever latch onto that aspect of her character in any.
Well,
I
think you nailed it at the beginning when you actually were trying to say like they're trying to make her kind of the new Wolverine. I actually think that's right, for better or worse, because if you think about it, when the first couple of movies came out in this X-Men franchise, I would read, I think I'd read a lot about how like, Wolverine is kind of seen as this guy who's kind of in the middle of Xavier and Magneto, and kind of like,
right.
He's like, which one is right? Like, what path am I going to choose? And that's clearly what Mystique is in these movies, is kind of right in the middle. And so, right, for better or worse, you're right. They do kind of make her Wolverine.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just some other quick things here before we wrap. Oh, so I wanted to mention that. So here's one of the things that kind of annoyed me, both about First Class and both about this movie, is that, in First Class, you have Sebastian Shaw, but he's not Shaw at all, right? The whole thing about Shaw in the comics is he's like the ultimate opportunist, right? He's a mutant, but he doesn't give a damn about mutant superiority or any of that. He's just, full on, hardcore capitalist. Like his company builds Sentinels, for crying out loud. So he is not someone who gives a damn at all about mutant rights or mutant superiority or anything like that. But then they turned him into Proto Magneto in that movie, even down to the helmet. And as much as much fun as, Kevin Bacon is a whole lot of fun in that movie, but it's just like, that is not who Shaw is. And I got the similar thing with Apocalypse here, because the whole thing about Apocalypse is he's all about survival of the fittest. Again, he doesn't care about mutants or humans or all that. His whole thing is like, whoever survives, the strongest survives.
Which they tap dance around in this movie, but never fully commit to the idea.
Instead, they're trying to focus on this thing almost like he's a mutant god, or he thinks he's a mutant god, and he's here to like help his children. I'm like, this is not the character. And I feel like if you here's what I think they should have done. Because Shaw's plan in First Class makes not a goddamn lick of sense, because you're going to start a nuclear war, and mutants are immune to radiation and to the physical, effects of, nuclear bombs going off. It's like, no, that doesn't make any sense at all. First off, but that plot would work very well for Apocalypse as the ultimate Darwinist. He's going to cause a nuclear war, and then only the strong will survive that. That would make perfect sense for Apocalypse.
He does kind of do in this movie, right? I mean,
well, what he does, he launches them out into space, and he gets rid of their weapons. So it's like the opposite of that.
I thought the same way. I was like, why? What exactly is happening? Like, why is he just setting them and then they're gonna come back down? I don't know. Like, it's like feels like he's wasting a lot of time. I don't know. That was weird.
And I feel like one of the things that they could have done to make this really different and to really push this series, this franchise in a very different direction is instead, and we couldn't have gotten this because Singer was so hyper focused on doing his version of Dark Phoenix, which he never ended up getting to do because then we found out that he's a sex pest. So, but one of the things I think would have been very interesting is if Apocalypse actually succeeds. And then this movie ends with them entering the Age of Apocalypse. That would have been a damn interesting movie and would have pushed things in a very unique direction.
I mean, it definitely would have been an unexpected ending. I'll give you that. That would have been interesting. And as you said yourself, I mean, something we definitely have not seen before. I want to ask you about this though with Shaw, because you are the comics expert. You know about this stuff way more than I do. I assume that you've seen the Dark Phoenix episodes with him from the old animated series. So, like, can you remind me, like, what was his organization again that he's like leader of? Like, what was that whole thing?
the Hellfire Club.
That's right, the Hellfire Club. See,
they couldn't call it that they couldn't call it that in the animated series because it's Hellfire. No, they did call it that in First Class, but they couldn't call it that in X-Men 92 because Hellfire, you can't say hell on a Saturday morning cartoon show at the time.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
But the Hellfire Club is this big organization, so they got chapters all over the world. So his group was called the Inner Circle of the Hellfire Club. So that was true, right? They did call him the Inner Circle. They just said the whole organization is Inner Circle as opposed to being the Hellfire Club's Inner Circle. So yeah, he was part of the Hellfire Club in that, and that was the name of the organization in First Class. But again, in First Class, they didn't really do much with the Hellfire Club concept.
Oh, well, that's what I'm saying. They should make a movie about that.
Yeah. Well, they were actually going to do they were actually going to do a TV show about it. There was actually going to be a TV show about it, which ended up not being done.
That would work.
And then they also used. Did you ever see The Gifted?
No.
Okay, check out The Gifted. It was an X-Men inspired series, and it was on FX.
Is this the one on FX that I'm thinking of?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, was Aubrey Plaza in it? Or am I thinking of another one?
No, that's Legion. She was in Legion.
Legion is the one I was thinking of. Oh, maybe I have seen The Gifted. I could check that one. I remember, but I do remember one. There was an X-Men related series, I think, with Aubrey Plaza, and I think it was called Legion.
Yeah, that was Legion. Legion was the one with Aubrey Plaza.
I remember that being wild, like a wild series.
Yeah, The Gifted. The Gifted was pretty cool though. They did. They were like, it was this. They were supposed to be doing 3 shows. They're going to be doing The Gifted. They're going to be doing Legion. They're going to be doing Hellfire Club. Hellfire Club. I can't remember what happened with that, but eventually they'd use the Hellfire Club in The Gifted instead. So you do see the Hellfire Club in, I want to say the 2nd season of The Gifted is when they come into play, and they're closer to the comics in that iteration. So
there's still so many X-Men characters that have not been tapped into, and I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Gambit on an X-Men related podcast. You have no idea. Now I'm going to get angry. Like, listen, like I said, I think, look, again, positives and negatives with this entire X-Men universe. Like, there have been some phenomenal movies, in my opinion, like Logan, Days of Future Past, X2. But I think even in our conversation about Cyclops, right, he had his moments. What irritates me to no end, Gambit is actually my favorite X-Men character. And he's like the one character who has just been totally lost aside. His one big moment was in the worst X-Men movie. And then I get spoiler alert for people who haven't seen Deadpool and Wolverine. As much fun as it was to see Channing Tatum play the character, like, he's kind of like, it was tongue in cheek and there wasn't like a serious take on it. I'm just like, Gambit, when is Gambit going to get his due in a live action movie? This is a guy who wears an awesome brown trench coat and throws explosive playing cards. He is such a cool character, and he's like the one character in like 28 X-Men movies or whatever, who's like never been focused on at all. Like at least Cyclops has his moments, like we've talked about. Jean Grey has had her moments. All these other characters have had their moments. Gambit has never had his. It irritates me to no end. I'm sorry. I cannot leave an X-Men related podcast and not mention that. Unbelievable. Just give Gambit a movie, for crying out loud.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree with you. Like, I thought it was fun seeing Tatum in Deadpool and Wolverine, but it's just
it was like a joke.
It was basically a parody. Yeah,
and I think Tatum could play like an actual like good version of the character. I mean, it was fun to see him in that movie, but like it was not like it was tongue in cheek.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the killer is that we did have the best Gambit ever, but it wasn't in an X-Men project. It was on Lost, and it was Josh Holloway playing Sawyer. That's Gambit. That was Gambit right there.
That's interesting. It's been a while since I've watched Lost, but okay, I can
go
see
back.
that.
Yeah, go back, watch Lost, and pay attention to Sawyer. He's basically Gambit. That is the character right there. Okay. Just like one of the best John Constantine on screen has been, you know, Giles in Buffy when he plays the young version of Giles. That's basically John Constantine is what he's doing there. But yeah, and also what else I want to mention about? Okay, so and this is where my theory comes into play about how Singer is just basically being lazy here and just keeping time until he can get to his version of Dark Phoenix. Is we have Quicksilver in this. And again, it's like the exact same shit we got in the first movie. The Quicksilver scene in Days of Future Past, great scene, but ultimately, yeah, it's such a great scene. But ultimately, that character I felt like that character was wasted because he's just there for that scene, he's just there for that special effect, and then that's it. It's a similar thing with this movie, and it's just like they redo the whole goddamn thing. It's the exact same thing, except now it becomes more. I feel like Singer took all the wrong lessons from that movie, and he's just like, everybody loves this, you know, slow motion scene, so we're going to do an even bigger, more drawn out slow motion scene.
You're not wrong, but Evan Peters is so damn good in that role. Like, I don't care. It's interesting though. It's like you could go one of two ways with this, and I love both sequences. The one in Days of Future Past is better. I will say the music selection though, and the one for Apocalypse is pretty. It's
a good music. It's a good song they chose. Yeah,
the mood and feel of that moment. In that sequence, and it is. I think it's like I actually think it's pretty. It's well constructed. But what I will say is like, part of me is, yeah, like why don't we see more of this character? Like they're crazy. Like this is clearly like you've got a home run here with this Quicksilver character with Evan Peters. At the same time, though, you know, I think that he's probably better in the short bursts that we do get him because you remember him more. He makes more of an impact. I think there could be an oversaturation of that character. If like to be honest, like I don't even like again, this goes back to me just I don't remember a damn thing about Dark Phoenix. Like I don't know. I'm gonna watch it again, but like I feel like they did amp up his role more, and I remember him in Dark Phoenix being unmemorable. Whereas in these two movies, you don't see a ton of them. They increase his role certainly a bit in Apocalypse, but I think he might be better for it, just the impact in these short bursts. So, but yeah, it's like he leaves you wanting more, which I think is a sign of a good character.
Now, see, my whole thing about Quicksilver is I prefer Aaron Taylor Johnson in Age of Ultron.
Oh, come on.
And I'm going to tell you why, because, this is the comic guy in me coming out, because Aaron Taylor Johnson in Age of Ultron, that is Quicksilver from the comics. He's this, this arrogant douchebag, basically, is what he is. And Evan Peters, he's not Quicksilver from the comics. He feels more like Impulse from DC.
Fair enough.
And that's what drives me crazy about his performance. And it's like and so whenever people are praising him, I'm just like, no, Aaron Taylor Johnson.
I find him massively entertaining. But can I say this about super speed, basically, that we've seen in all these movies? And like, by the way, remember at the beginning of this podcast, I made the mistake of bringing the room down, talk about the Flash, and it's like, like what? It's just like I actually said this in my podcast, Batman by the Numbers. We did a Flash review episode. And I said this in the podcast, whereas the effects in that movie were so lame and just totally forgettable. Yet 10 years before that, they did it way better in Days of Future Past. It drives me crazy. Like how like super speed, again, we've seen it look so great on screen in terms of that very specific superpower, especially with the scene in Days of Future Past, which is so memorable. And I think it's memorable in Apocalypse too. It's like then you get 10 years later in The Flash, and it's like we're going in the opposite direction. It drives me crazy. Just absolutely Flash, just not good. Not a good movie. We
Yeah.
don't have to dwell on
You
that
know what?
anymore.
And this is just my personal thing. I am kind of done with the slow motion as a representation of super speed. It's just
I agree.
it feels,
No. It's time. It's time to move on. I would agree. I think
yeah.
we've maximized. I think we've seen that at its best potential. Let's try something else with it.
Yeah.
I will co-sign that.
Yeah, absolutely. We also get the Hugh Jackman cameo here in the Weapon X outfit. Or kind of, it's like a minimized version of the helmet. It's not the whole big honking thing he has in the comics, but I was mixed on that. On one hand, it was really cool to see. On the other hand, again, it's this whole idea of like we keep going back to the well. And I feel like it.
Yeah, good. I didn't mind. Like, good scene. Like, fine. Like, I didn't feel like. Here's all I'll say is, didn't feel. It didn't feel that forced. It's just like, I'm trying to remember going into the movie if like, do I think I'm going to see Hugh Jackman here or not? I can't remember, but it's like I don't think anyone's surprised that he would make an appearance in this movie. It does make sense too if you think back to where he was left in Days of Future Past, I guess. But yeah, but it's like, listen, at the end of the day, like it's you get to see Wolverine freak out. It was entertaining. I'm never going to complain about Hugh Jackman showing up in these movies. He's just, again, he is one of my favorite superhero performances ever. Him as Wolverine is so damn good. Like, I'm not going to say no to a Hugh Jackman performance. But yeah, I mean, did it add a lot? Probably not. But listen, you get to see Wolverine freak out a little bit. He's going nuts in the hallway. Like, whatever. I'll take it. It was fine. Solid cameo.
Yeah. And I think that's basically everything I had to say about this film. Is there anything else you had to add about it?
No, I mean, basically, like at the end of this conversation, I feel the same way about this film that I really have since the beginning. Is just like, it's a little frustrating. It's a little disappointing because I do feel like there was something there, and I think they had a foundation of some good elements here. Because I still think the cast, for the most part, is working at a pretty high level. Everyone is still really into these roles. You still get great Fassbender. I think you're still getting great McAvoy. And again, I think Oscar Isaac is doing a lot with a little here. I really like what they were doing with Apocalypse early on, but I just think it's really disappointing about how such a whatever villain he becomes at the end of this all. So like at the end of the day, bringing in Apocalypse, like it should feel like this epic movie because he's such a big villain in the comics. And X-Men fans know him from the animated series. And we know just kind of what his impact in sort of, threat level is just from that. And you just, he's powerful here. Like you get some moments, but at the end of the day, I would say it was a missed opportunity. But at the same time, it's an okay X-Men movie. Like I said, I'm not going to change my opinion. Middle of the pack. What's interesting here is this movie came out in 2016. Here are the superhero movies that came out in 2016. I mean, you want to talk about this movie and why it was lost in the shuffle? You had Civil War, Deadpool, Doctor Strange, BVS, and Suicide Squad. Probably my least favorite superhero movie ever made. I've talked about that on Babby by the Numbers. But yeah, just a wild year for superhero movies, and just you want to talk about all sorts of opinions, just positive, negative, like whatever. I mean, just divisive film movies. I mean, just man, I mean, you can talk about that year of superhero movies all day. So it's no wonder why this one was just kind of lost in the shuffle, and honestly took a back seat to another X-Men related movie that came out this year. So yeah, and Deadpool.
And you know what? Something else too, and I want to mention the costumes we see at the end of this because everybody goes nuts over these costumes, and honestly, they don't impress me because it's just like
I'm kind of with you. Like Cyclops in particular, it's like here's what's annoying is, and then I'll let you get into this, but it's like with Cyclops, his costume's pretty iconic, especially from the animated series, and it's like they're almost there, but then they stop short. It's like, just if you're gonna do it, just make it it from the comics and the show. Just like, why are you like going like 74.8% there? Like, yeah, I agree with you. It's annoying. Just do it. Like, that's what you want to do. Like, I don't understand why it's like they're going like 3/4 of the way there. It's annoying.
Thank you.
All
Yes,
right,
that's
but
exactly my point. It's like everyone's going crazy over these costumes. And like, it's like, and I feel like this is just, it's like when you're in the desert and you're just desperate for any drop of water you can get. And it's just like, well, look, they're giving it kind of to us. I'm like, yeah, no, it looks like bad cosplay to me is what it looks like. Especially when you look at, like you mentioned, those other superhero movies that we had that same year. Civil War. My God, the characters look amazing in that. Even I despise Batman v Superman with the Fury of a Thousand Suns.
Can't argue with Batman's costume though. Come on.
No, the costumes are on point in that movie. Maybe too dark, yes, but the design sense, the aesthetic is there. And it's like here, it's just like, come on. And it's just another example of just like how lazy and how uncommitted that I feel like everyone at the higher levels of these productions are.
I actually prefer what they do even in the 2000 film for X-Men, where look, you can say like it's way far off from the costumes, but at least they picked a road. Like, at least it's consistent. Like, it was just simple, just kind of like the black leather, like, it works for that movie. That's fine. But it's like, this annoys me more, where it's like, we're going to kind of do this and kind of do this. It's like, pick a road. Like, what are you going to do here? Yeah. Like, that's actually, I think, more annoying than just the consistency of the earlier movies.
And I will say this about those costumes in, X2 especially, I think they look the best there, is that, what, comic accuracy aside, just from an aesthetic point of view, the costumes in the first two movies look much better than these things. They look more expensive. They look more effort was put into it. It looks like they were just kind of slapped together.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. Yeah, I felt the same way. Yeah, it's actually, like I said, like with Cyclops, it sticks out like a sore thumb. Totally right.
Yeah. All right. So I think it's a good note to end on. And, the good thing about this is that the Fox movies are done. So we are going to we've already seen, we've gotten tastes of it in first in Multiverse of Madness. We saw, Patrick Stewart in the classic hover chair. We saw Beast pop up at the end of Marvels in his classic look. We've seen Hugh Jackman, obviously, in the yellow suit with, I don't like the mask. That's always been my thing about the mask. So, but it was still cool to see nonetheless. And
I guess we're getting one more go around.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Okay.
We're getting some of them in Doomsday, so it'll be interesting to see what they do with them there, and then what they do going forward. Because my whole thing is, I don't want any multiverse shenanigans bringing the mutants into the Marvel universe. I just want them to have been there and then have like this explosion of mutant births or mutant activation due to the Infinity Stones. That's how you do it, because you already have that ground laid with how Wanda and Pietro got their powers in the first place. That's how I would do it. I think that's the easiest way to do it. And also just recast across the board. Like, none of this Hugh Jackman until he's 90. Just let the dude rest. he's put in a lot of work. Let the dude rest.
Yeah, like I said at the beginning, I mean, listen, Hugh Jackman's performance as his character, it's very important to me, and it was spectacular. And I mean, his performance in Logan is just like, I will never forget that. But yes, it's time. It's time.
Yeah.
Really curious to see where we are with the X-Men like 5 years from now. I'm very curious to see where we are, but I think it's probably trending in a new cast. We'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Dan, thanks so much for coming on. It's great. Always great when I come on your show to chat, and it was awesome having you on here to talk for a little bit too. So why don't you tell people where they can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. No, this was a lot of fun, and like I said, it was fun to just talk about superhero movies. That was not Batman for a change, but listen, Batman, of course, is my favorite character, and that's where you can listen to me. If you want to follow me, I am on X at D Cohen Writer. Again, that's on X at D Cohen writer. But go to thepopbreak.com. We have a lot of great podcasts there. But if you want to check out Batman by the Numbers, you hover over the podcast tab, you find Batman by the Numbers, and you can find all the archives of all of our episodes. Our pilot episode we ranked all the Batman movies. It was a great first episode, spirited discussion. And like I said, Perry's been on some big ones. He's been on a couple of our draft episodes. We did last summer, the definitive Batman draft. I'm telling you, it was fun to record and it's a fun listen. And we did a recent one where we're drafting Batman allies, and we had some really fun categories and kind of rules to that. And I think everyone had a lot of fun with that one. So we've done some draft episodes. And again, we've done so many ranking episodes. And we talked about the Superman trailer here earlier. Trust me, we have a lot of great Superman content coming up in the near future on the Batman by the Numbers podcast, because we also do like to cover a lot of DC stuff as well. So, and again, we've done a lot of great podcasts on some of the Batman villains. I mean, obviously he's got the best rogues gallery. I can't argue with that one. We have done some big rankings episode. We did one a while back where we ranked all the actors who have played the Joker. That was a really, really good episode. You should definitely check that one out. So please listen to Batman by the Numbers. I love doing it. We do it once a month. But that's what I got going on. Thank you again for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, anytime you want to come on back, always glad to have you on. And if you need someone for those Superman episodes, he's my favorite character, so just let me know. Okay.
Oh yeah, we're definitely getting you back on for sure.
Awesome. All right. So that does it for this episode. SuperheroCinephiles.com is the website, and we are SuperheroCinephiles.com on Blue Sky, Super Cinema Pod on Instagram, Threads, everywhere else. So you can find us on there, although mostly I'm active on Blue Sky. And we're back now. You guys are listening to this again, probably in September or August, but we have been just finished up the Summer of Superman, and hopefully we'll have more episodes coming up down the pike. I'm starting to talk to people and seeing about getting some stuff scheduled up. Thanks for listening, as always, and catch you next time. Thanks for listening to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. Superhero Cinephiles is produced by me, Percival Constantine. The show is created by myself and the late, great Derek Ferguson, our host emeritus. Visit us on the web at superherocinephiles.com to listen to past episodes or find out how you can be a guest yourself. Support the show by visiting our advertiser links or click the Buy Me a Coffee link on the website to make a one-time donation. We are Super Cinema Pod on both Instagram and Blue Sky, so please be sure to follow us. We'd also appreciate it if you could rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and share us with your friends.
Thank you for listening. And as always, good night, good evening. God bless.